This was the beginning of one of the most complex coordinated attacks ever to happen in the city of Ramadi. As we run out of the CP, there is tracer fire in the sky, like a 4th of July fireworks show. There are rounds impacting the camp, snapping off the walls as I'm leaving the door of the command center. You're just walking through random bullets smacking walls as you're coming out of the front door of your house.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we have a great interview with 24-year retired Marine and best-selling author of Echo and Ramadi, Scott Huesing. Scott led the Magnificent Bastards, as they're called, of 2-4 Marines during one of the most brutal periods of the post-9/11 war from 2006 into 2007 during the surge. Scott went from self-described terrible high school student with a 1.24 GPA to enlisted Marine to a Mustang, which is a Marine officer who was formerly enlisted, serving on 10 deployments in dozens of countries. In this episode, Scott takes us into an intense fight to extract several pinned-down Marines that included bringing M1A1s along, and then also losing his first casualty just weeks into the deployment as a company commander of Echo Company. Since leaving the service, Scott wrote the best-selling book, Echo and Ramadi. He's helped others write their own books, runs nonprofits, and more. With that, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with someone who made it through some of the hardest fighting in the war, with Scott Huesing. All right, Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with us and share your stories.
Yeah, we already started. Like, this is the before the show, after the show is like, oh man, why didn't we say that on the show? And so it's cool, man. Thanks again for the invite, dude.
No, of course.
There was so many of the same people, so it would bore listeners if we started name dropping like all the same people we know and like guys here in Texas. Like, you've been on Mike Ritland's show. Mike's a good friend of mine. And
great guy.
I love that we share our community freely. Like, oh, you got to meet this guy. You should have this guy on the show. Because for veterans who make this weird transition into the entertainment space, they're out there. There's guys that soccer mom their shit. They're like, well, let me see if he wants to share his number. I'm like, I don't play that game. Like, if I share Ryan's number, Ryan gets this random text. He knows like this guy's been vetted and he's not going to be trying to steal my ATM PIN number. So anyway.
No, I'm glad you're on. And for people who are listening and can't see, you've got your kind of your books in the background, especially Echo and Ramadi, these cool posters. I've got one that you sent over my way. But I insisted that we hit record because you were already telling some stories that I was like, no, everybody's going to want to hear some of these. Let's start with Bob Hamer, if we can.
Yeah. So Ryan was regaling me with his short bio before the show, which I already knew because I've seen a bunch of your stuff and we know all the same dudes. But you were talking about how when you were in doing ops, one of the things you took apart was pedophiles, and like that's such a taboo subject to begin with. But when I was still stationed in California, I just retired and moved into writing. I met this great guy named Bob Hamer, and one of his things, among others, like he was a Marine, of course, like we're all this crazy brotherhood, but he was also a lawyer in the Marine Corps. And he's like, I don't like being a lawyer. And then so he gets out and he joins the FBI. He's like, the FBI sucks. He's like, I don't like getting the FBI. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be an agent. So he wants to be undercover. So he becomes an undercover FBI agent. And his book, titled The Last Undercover by Bob Hamer, is a story of his whole upbringing through the FBI in his career. And it was back before computers. And I was telling you this. He had 2 phones hanging on his kitchen wall, the good guy phone and the bad guy phone. And he had to brief his family like, kids, don't ever answer the bad guy phone. That's just for daddy. Well, he took down this LA art syndicate. He did undercover ops across the board. But his real capstone event was he dismantled this organization called NAMBLA, which stands for the North American Man Boy Lovers Association. And Bob would go to work every day with one of those crutches that has like a hand grip and a cuff around your forearm and the rubber stopper on the end. It's aluminum. That was his disguise. And I was just fascinated by this. Like, when you want to bitch about your coworkers, this guy spent, I don't know how many years, Bob was embroiled in the bowels of probably the most despised demographic of human society. And when I say despised, it's not by us in the general population. Within prisons, they're despised.
It's objective. It's like objectively, they're the lowest rung.
They're the scum of the earth. So anyway, Bob was, Bob and I have been longtime friends, and we were eating breakfast one day in California, in Rainbow, California, at this this little breakfast place owned by a Marine. And I'm sitting there with Bob. It's me, a Navy SEAL who is like super, tier 1 operator. My buddy Jack, who is a multi #1 best-selling author, and also has the most confirmed kills of any living Marine Corps sniper. He was my company gunny. Anyway, we're sitting there and we're all just, just friends and hanging out. And I was looking around the restaurant, and I was just looking at this table, and I was looking at this table. I was like, I wonder if any of these people in here have any fucking idea who is sitting at this table. But right then, like a lightning bolt that hit me, I go, what about that table? Like, what is that old timer story? And just because I'm a nosy person as a writer, I always have been, even as a Marine, like super nosy, like gear and everything. But I thought maybe that guy was in the CIA, or maybe this guy invented the eyeglass repair kit and he's a billionaire or something. Just this random stuff. Yeah. And it just gives me perspective, because I'm some, poor kid who, barely graduated high school from Waukegan, Illinois, with a stellar 1.24 GPA. Any listener out there, if there's comments in this on YouTube, if you can beat that, I want to meet you. I want to send you a free signed copy of my book. If you had less than a 1.24 GPA in high school, I will need proof of transcript.
Yeah, we need a picture of it, though. You can't
I don't know. I don't care. Anybody that fucking admits that, Ryan, like, they're getting a book. Yeah. Period. That's my gift. And there's nothing gratuitous about that. I think it's like, I've never spoken in front of a group, but from my upbringing from Waukegan, Illinois, and just being a really bad kid, drinking underage, fighting, running from the cops, getting caught by the cops, getting thrown in jail, getting bailed out of jail. I just led a real high risk lifestyle growing up. And, I had some friends, and, we ran in similar circles, and I played sports and all that, but I get a phone call one day, and I can't remember most people's phone numbers, but I picked up that phone on the wall at 662-3427. And it's my buddy, Andy. And he goes, "Hey man, you'll never guess what I did today." And I'm thinking, you crashed your Camaro again, or you crashed your dad's Corvette or something. It's like, he goes, "No, I joined the Marine Corps." I was like, "You're fucking kidding me." And so he says, "You got to meet these guys." And this. Any veteran listening, or anybody that's attempted to join the military, knows this. Go down to the recruiting office. And these guys are trained professionals to sell. They are the best salesmen in the world. And they got the ribbons. They got their office is draped in camouflage and these flags and all of this crazy happy horse shit. And man, I listened to the game these guys were talking, and I thought to myself, I have never met a bigger group of risk takers in my life. And I was like, where do I sign? And that was it. I was, 18 years old. I just then turned 19, went to boot camp, and did well. I was, the guide, the platoon leader, whatever, as a recruit, and then went to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And then I realized the value of an education. And so I hung up my rifle, and I joined the reserves as a machine gunner, went to college at Illinois State. And I'm not saying that to brag, because they only let us like 50 or 60,000 in every year. But dude, I was just happy to get into college, so, but I still loved, what I did in the Marine Corps. I still love being around Marines. You kind of gravitate towards them once you transition at any point in your career. And then this young sergeant got a hold of me. God loves sergeants, man. And he got me a boat space to officer candidate school, and it was just great chemistry or kismet or fate or whatever it is. And I still wanted to serve. And, some 15 years later, that's kind of where my story picks up with the book I wrote. And then, I retired after 24 years and 10 deployments and, visited over 60 countries. So it's been no regrets ever coming back.
So I'm sure when you were that crazy 17, 18-year-old, you were like, one day I'm going to be a best-selling author, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I used to probably MF my English teacher in high school. And
actually, yeah. Does your old English teacher know what has become of you?
No,
you ever take it back?
Maybe I'll look her up. That's a good.
I feel like that could be an interesting little social media segment. Yeah. 1.24 GPA bestseller meets old English teacher,
or my guidance counselor. I still remember that guy's name for sure. Yeah.
Did he tell you to go check out the Marines?
No, he did not.
No.
What's that test you take of the job skills you like? That's you ran. Do you like to fix a door latch? Do you do this? Do you pick your nose? I don't know. But I don't ever remember getting any guidance from that guy. Yeah. So
all right.
I just lucked into it, I guess.
So before I ask you, I did want to ask you about James Livingston, but right before that, you mentioned you go into the recruiter's office. I mean, usually they share like a hallway with Army, Navy, you got the Air Force, the Marines. Did you even look in these other rooms, or did you just get brought? You were straight in.
Straight in, yeah. And it was there was 3 dudes, 2 staff sergeants and a sergeant, and then my guy. He was a little sawed-off Puerto Rican dude named Joe. I won't mention his last name, but he was in the air wing. So I really didn't know. I didn't know what a boot band was, man. Those rubber things that stretch and you wrap them around your boots to keep your pants bloused up. Like I didn't know anything. But come to find out, like we get back and he got arrested for grand theft auto, gets kicked out of the Marine Corps. So like I didn't have a great relationship with my recruiter at that level, but the other 2 senior staff NCOs, they're really great. And I still keep in touch with them. And funny side story, I'm doing a book signing at Camp Pendleton a couple of years ago. I'm in the entrance where the sliding doors come apart and the carts, and I got the table set up and the books. And who walks in the door but Randy Hines? He's a contractor now and surprised me. I almost
was he your recruiter?
He was my recruiter. Yeah. He was like the senior. He's the guy that did all the paperwork and all this. Joe was kind of the sales guy. And
Scott, how, interviewing 200 vets, this really only seems to happen in the Marine Corps where like you guys stay in touch with recruiters. How do you do that? I mean, you go off into the giant, Marine Corps.
Yeah.
How do you stay in touch?
I don't know. I think social media has helped out a little bit. But and I don't even think it has anything to do with the smallest branch of the military with, sometimes close to 200,000 Marines. I don't know. It's just something that with any organization too, there's people that develop relationships, and I love cultivating relationships too. And like, you can't just say like, oh, I know Ryan. Like there'll be times throughout our relationship too, and our friendship, Ryan, we're like, I'll just call you. And you might think like, oh, it's Scott calling. I'm not going to hit the green button. He's going to want something. Yes, I am going to want something. But there's a lot of times too, where I'm just calling like, hey, Ryan, man, what's up? How's your family? Like, because I think that's important, and you have to make time to do it. It sounds a little cliche, man, but that's really how we stay connected. And I think that's a really important part, especially in the veteran space. But I would submit that's a lost art in the private sector too. Like if they were to adopt that, I think you'd have better businesses, you'd have better leadership, you'd have better employee retention, all those things. So
no, I agree.
It's something cool too. And like even my drill instructors, I had contact with a couple of them. And then another funny story is like I'm on the phone with Jim Booker. He's a retired sergeant major. He was in 2-4. He's down in Waco, Texas. And we're just chit-chatting about something about the reunion we're having here coming up in October in Texas. And He goes, "Hey man, I gotta let you go." He goes, "I got this guy coming over, former recon Bubba," and he tells me his name. He goes, "Is he a little short, sawed off dude with a crooked nose?" He was in. He goes, "Yeah, yeah." He go, "He was my drill instructor. Like you have to send him my number." So like,
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a small world, man, for sure.
All right, let's talk James, retired Major General, Medal of Honor winner, James Livingston. How do you know this person? And the reason it came up, it's on the book that you sent me that also, to your point on like cultivating relationships, you sent a very nice card with it. Like you could tell the attention to detail and touch. But
I'm a little bougie like that. But also my mom used to own a Christmas store. So she taught me how to wrap properly. And like it's all about the presentation. So anyway, I'm glad you appreciate that.
He's on your book. How'd that happen?
Yeah, General Livingston. We share a similar bond. He and I. He was the Echo company commander of 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines during the Battle of Dido, which happened in 1968 in Vietnam in Dido, and one of the most intense 3-day battles. 2 Medal of Honor recipients came out of that. Jim Livingston and Jay Vargas. Bill Weiss, who was the battalion commander, was a Navy Cross recipient, second highest award. While Bill Weiss just passed away several months ago. So we both shared the same, company flag, the guidon, and that's really our connection as
That's
commander.
Cool.
He in Vietnam and myself in Ramadi in 06 and 07 during some of the most heavy urban combat, in modern warfare. And that's something pretty cool. And another author who gets, tagged to write some of his speeches and manage his schedule is an Army/Marine. He's a hybrid. He was in both services. Colin Heaton, World War II historian. He really was the one that read my book first, the draft, and he's like, General Livingston is going to want to be a part of this. So General Livingston wrote the foreword, and over the years and through the association of Magnificent Bastards, which is our call sign, which we're very, very proud of, we just have always kept in touch. And I think it's important too. Our Vietnam vets are getting up there in age. General Livingston, I think, is going to be 85 this year. We share just a real cool bond within the battalion, and I'll never forget. I got this phone call from it was General Weiss's radio operator, Steve Wilson, and he calls me, and I'm gonna butcher this, but he's got this. I think it's this Tennessee or Kentucky accent where somebody's like, hey Scott, what's up? It's Steve. I said, hey Steve, what's going on? He goes, hey man, I want you to really think about taking over as the president of the 2-4 Association. And I said, no, Steve. I have a book coming out. Like, I'm needy. Because no. He's like, don't give me an answer today. He goes, just think about it. I just want you, like, he's totally salesman to me. And he used to work for Aramco. He's this big sales dude in oil and gas. And so he just, he lets it simmer with me. And I said, Steve, man, I love you like a brother, but the answer is no. I said, I'm just too busy. He goes, okay, man, just think about it. One day goes by, and the phone rings, and I look at it as General Livingston, and this is it. You don't get much in all caps text or an email normally that says AYE, like I, or like Roger that. So General Livingston calls me, goes, Hey there, combat. I'm going to need you to take over that association and lead. And I said 2 words, Roger that. Then I was stuck happily as the senior cat herder, for all intents and purposes, of upwards of like 500 Vietnam vets.
Oh my gosh!
During my tenure of presidency, it was 7 years. We managed to recruit a lot of the younger guys, and I'm very honored when they're always calling me the young guy, and like I'm 55 now, so I was 48 at the time. They're like, "Yeah, you're the young guy. Bring the young guys in." So now we have over 1,500 members in the association of Magnificent Bastards, and we're going to get together again this October for a little little reunion. It's always cool. It's always
That's
cool.
great. That is
Yep.
great. Oh man, you can't say no to that. All right.
No, no one says no to General Livingston.
No.
I have such a great relationship with him now. It's like I check in on him all the time, make sure he's doing good. But he's one of those guys people see in public, and he wears the medal very proudly. And he gets up and he gives his speech, and there's this low gravelly voice, and he's from South Carolina and Mount Pleasant, and he gets in part of the story, and they're attacking and they're moving, and then I told my Marines, like, it's gonna get bad, and you know what I told them next? Fix bayonets. And the crowd goes wild.
Awesome.
Everyone's just like loving General Livingston, and so I know all that part of him on the front, but he plays a grouch on TV, but he is one of the sweetest guys I've ever met in my life. And
that's awesome.
There's so many perceptions of guys who, have this immense responsibility and have the capacity to wear the Medal of Honor. It's not everybody. And, General Livingston is, one of those guys, and just really humbled to have so many of these guys' numbers in my iPhone. It's nuts, man. From that kid from Waukegan, Illinois to where I'm at today, I'm pretty lucky, man.
That's amazing. Well, you mentioned, as you were talking earlier, your kind of career trajectory, that you ended up in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. What the hell happened there? What were you doing?
Well, I always take a little bit of shit from guys I served with, but we weren't doing a whole lot. It was a 3-day war. I'm not diminishing the service of anyone, myself included.
No, I know. Yeah.
But it was, I wrote about this in Echo and Ramadi. Is like, in comparison to other deployments, it was very pale in comparison, Ryan, because there was a lot of sitting around. There was a lot of fucking off. There was a lot of filling sandbags. There was a lot of boredom for months on end. And then really, sitting on a 50 cal the night they launched the air attack, and our position was like on the egress route from Sheikh Isa Air Base in Bahrain. I watched 100 aircraft fly overhead, just, F4s and F-111s and all these, B2s. And I was thinking to myself, man, someone's going to have a bad fucking night. And they did. And in 3 days, we mopped that campaign up, brought everyone back. And, so, it was just one of those things, and you compare it to, what I was doing in Ramadi in 06 and 07, man, that was the fucking Super Bowl of being a grunt, and to be a company commander in charge of, 250 fire breathers who were just attacking and crushing the enemy day in and day out. It's like I said, it's kind of apples and oranges, but at the end of the day too, it's like, it's what everybody who joins the military strives for. Like, you want your war. Like, for a lot of people, maybe that wasn't their war, but it's nonetheless part of my career.
You mentioned earlier that you go to Illinois State, right? And then this staff sergeant kind of locks you in and brings you into OCS. Was there a chance you would not have gone back in, or was that the path?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually going to work for the U.S. Federal Marshals. And so one of the things too, like, despite the stellar high school academic prowess that I had, I did much better in college. I, worked as a bartender and as a waiter, all around town. I went to day school, night school, preschool, summer school, and I graduated in 3 years with just over a 3.0 GPA. And that wasn't an easy thing to do, but I share that comparison too, because it is a real testimony to what military gives young wayward souls like myself. It gives them discipline, it gives them mission focus, and it gives them the drive to succeed in any obstacle that's put in front of you. So these college professors were nothing but a speed bump to me after everything I'd been through over the last 4+ years. So I was approached by a captain on campus, and he told me about this program. It's called the Platoon Leaders Course. And so you go to officer candidate school one summer, and then you go back another summer, and then you get your commission. And I don't like to do math in public, but I'm thinking boot camp plus one summer plus 2 summers. That sounds like 3 boot camps. And I'm like, no. And they told me about this other program they had called Officer Candidates Class, where you just graduate from college and then you go straight to Officer Candidate School. I was like, that sounds more my style. Then it's only 2 boot camps. So that's when Sergeant Connor, and I wish I need to find this guy. Sergeant Connor, if you're listening to this and you're in the greater Bloomington Normal area circa 1998, 97, you need to get a hold of me somehow. But I want to thank that kid, because he's the one that really put it all together and got me to OCS. But there was a hiring freeze, like there was some federal hiring freeze or something, and my internship got delayed. And
for the marshals,
not being a math guy like pilots, I thought like there's no way I can wait tables and bartend for another year while they free up their hiring freeze in the federal government. So it was really fate, that kid called me. He called me in my apartment and he says, "Hey sir, if you can come down and run a physical fitness test and take a physical up at Great Lakes Naval Base, we could get you to OCS in January." I'm like, "Tell me when and where." And that was it. Yeah.
Jeez. So timing wise, like I want to spend a lot of time on Ramadi, of course. But for kind of 9/11 to the time you go to Ramadi, what's your role op tempo like? What are you experiencing with the Marines then?
Well, man, we don't talk about that enough. I love it that you asked about 9/11 because it really was such a fulcrum point in U.S. history and world history. And like, where were you? We used to ask that, where were you on 9/11? Like no one asks that question anymore. It's like an afterthought. I was deployed. I was in Okinawa, Japan with my unit. And I was with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines at the time. And we were on a unit deployment program, doing theater security cooperation stuff. And I'll never forget it. I was in the barracks. It was, I can't remember what time. It was late at night or late in the evening. And I had this crappy little 14-inch, deployment TV. And I'm watching, it was probably Sky News because that's all we get over there. And I'm watching this. And they show this coverage of this plane hitting the tower. I was like, holy shit. And then right after that, you see the second plane hit. And it like, I don't know if it's something innate in me or it's the training, but I said, this is a terrorist attack. Instinctively, I knew it was a terrorist attack. Like no one parks 2 planes into a building. It just doesn't happen. I ran down the hallway of the barracks. I'm literally banging on the doors of all the lieutenants. I'm like, you have to get in my room and watch this. This is world changing.
Wow.
And,
yeah.
There was some overreaction on, no one knew it was going to happen, especially after the Pentagon got hit and everything else that unfolded that day. But, there was some silliness too, and you can appreciate this. They had Marines on post around Camp Schwab in northern Okinawa, as if Okinawa was a big target, manning machine guns. And I was like, come on, man. Like this is, that boiled down quickly to a low simmer, thankfully. But after that, we came back and I was getting close to getting orders and leaving the unit. I was a senior lieutenant. I just got promoted to captain, and I got selected to be a platoon commander with a fleet anti-terrorism security team company. We call it FAST Company. They work for the Navy. We do anti-terrorism operations. It's a very hand-selected assignment. At the time, they're very, like, out of all the captains in the Marine Corps, there's like 6 each year that get picked. So I was lucky. I don't know if it was luck, but I was very fortunate to get selected. And then, I went to FAST. We trained up. I was with 2nd FAST Company. We did a deployment to Spain. And at the time, again, this goes back to what we were talking about, is like, everybody wants their war. So we're doing these shipboard operations in the Straits of Gibraltar and going over to Greece. And we're basically working with amphibious units, Navy SEALs, and we hitch a ride on a frigate or a destroyer, and then we do cross decks and we climb in the rails of these ships that are transporting munitions and all this, top secret shit over to the war. And we're like, man, I want to go be a part of the war.
Yeah.
We were doing our part. That was our job. Like, you can't kill people in a war zone if you don't have bullets and toilet paper. You just can't. So I came back, and then I remember I was in Virginia. It was like a Saturday or Sunday morning, man, and the news came on, and they caught Saddam. And remember that picture, like,
oh yeah,
reaching his spider hole, and he comes out with that fucked up beard, and his hair was all askew and
disheveled. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was a soup sandwich, and Saddam was going down. And I thought to myself, and again, this is the wrong thing to think for most people. Normal people don't think like this. We do. I thought, fuck,
I missed it.
I'm missing the war.
Yeah.
Well, again, it goes back to, what I tell people all the time, like, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. So, several deployments later, that same year, I was in Baghdad with Fast Company, doing our mission in Baghdad. We were there for 9-10 months, and then I came back and went to school. And then we found out when I was it was like a captain's career course, like the Army has.
Did you do the one at Benning?
No, I went to
okay.
Expeditionary Warfare School in Quantico for whatever it is, 3-6 months, something like that. And then they pulled a bunch of us aside and they said, "Hey, you guys aren't graduating." And that was like the wrong thing. So like, what the fuck did we do? And then they go, You're going to your units early. Like, there was even a long pause. Like, it was like this American Idol type. Ryan Seacrest's like, "You guys aren't graduating. You instead are going to your units early to fight the war." And we're like, yes, we made it on to the next round. So we left. And I got to say something out loud real quick, because I'm thinking, it's like, this is one of the best fucking podcasts I've ever been on. Like,
shut up.
No, I'm not kidding. It's like, I never talk about this stuff. Like, it's always the same, like, stuff. Like I always love it when the guys like hit that one question. But anyway, I digress. I'm not saying it gratuitously either. But so I go back home, and I packed all my stuff up, like, said goodbye to my family, like, checked out. I was like, I drove my Jeep and a trailer across the country from Quantico, Virginia to Camp Pendleton, parked my Jeep in the parking lot. This is a Tuesday. I took command on a Friday, and I'm living in my office. I wrote about this in the book too, by the way, because it's pathetic. And the Marines fucking hated me for it. Like, any boss you have that like sleeps in the office, you hate that guy. I mean, I wasn't a tyrant or anything, but they're just like, I'm never going to get a moment's rest if this guy just stays here. But our op tempo, when I checked in, just like that's when we really put the foot on the gas. So like from, back to your question, like from then to now, like when I checked into 2-4 before we got into Ramadi, like that's how quick things were going. And, a little bit of my mindset too, like some of the things like, guys, like, they wish for war. Like, who does that? I don't know.
Yep. And how much time did you have before you went to Ramadi with them? Like, was it, you were right in? Did you get time to train up and get to know these guys?
I'll screw this up, but it was spring. So it was like April, May. When I drove across country, checked in, took command, like that next week. So like all literally like boxes and like all my shit is on a trailer behind my Jeep, and packed in my Jeep. And that next week we left Camp Pendleton, California, which is like San Diego for those who don't know. And we drove like 3 hours northeast to 29 Palms, California, which is the combat center. It's this vast expanse of nothingness that smells like human waste from the sewage treatment plant at Lake Bandini. And we went out and we trained during a big combined arms exercise called Mojave Viper back then. And all the battalions come together and they have role players, and We do all these scenario-based training. We do, small arms. We do indirect fire. We have, close air support. All of these things are available at the combat center. And one of the things that was great too, to my benefit and to the young Marines that just got dumped into the battalion right before this pre-deployment workup, we had a bunch of the seasoned guys from Ramadi in '04 that were now senior lance corporals, these salty lance corporals, E3s, like 18, 19-year-old kids. But they knew their shit. And then we got corporals and sergeants and some of the staff, non-commissioned officers. So there was a balance. I remember too, like during that training, I pulled a bunch of the guys together, other guys that had already been to combat. And I said, honestly, man, like, how is this training? Like, is it going to get us ready?
Interesting.
To go back to Iraq? And almost pound for pound, all the sergeants and NCOs, like, they said, this is good training, sir. This is good shit. So I was thinking to myself, institutionally, we are progressing, we're improving, and we're addressing the needs of the warfighter. And that was, that sounds like some officer type shit, but that's your job. You have to like be a force supplier, and you have to make sure that the training is good, the gear is good, the toilet paper is soft enough, like you've got enough garbage bags to, take the trash away for, 200-300 Marines. Like this is what you get paid for, in addition to a lot of other high level responsibility stuff. But those lives are in your hands. But hearing that from the guys it was good, It really validated it.
How about, as you kind of set the stage for us going into Ramadi, you had already been an enlisted Marine. You're now responsible for 240, 250 Marines. What did that feel like, having been on the other side of that? Like, you're the officer now, you had been the private before. Any different? I don't know. I mean, I guess you wouldn't know it any other way, but any additional responsibility you felt going in there?
I get asked that question a lot. Did being enlisted make you a better officer? And my standard answer, until I did my buddy Dave Diaz's podcast, it was always no. Like, I never thought like being enlisted made me a better officer. And there's plenty of, officers who've been enlisted, we call them Mustangs. So being a Mustang, which is a horse of multiple breeds, I didn't ever think it like made me a better officer. But what it did give me was real perspective on how valuable that young enlisted Marine's time is. And I never, ever wanted their time wasted with these mundane, chores or uniform inspections that, I suffered through as a young enlisted guy. Like, it's just a complete waste of time. And I'm not saying that good order and discipline and being squared away in your uniform is unimportant. All first sergeants and sergeants majors listening, it's very important. But I'm saying having 6 sets of short sleeve shirts where the buttons are all like covered in a line, like, it's a waste of time. The Marines should be training. They should be at the gym. They should be chasing girls, all these things to decompress and get smarter as a warfighter. That's where the focus should be. And I think we've gotten really good at getting better at those things, like getting away from those things. One of the best was, our new uniform when it came in, and you didn't have to iron that thing.
Yeah. I mean, when you were talking about the blouse, like the little strap that you put on your boots.
Yeah.
Like, that's back in the day, I feel like. Do you even still need that now?
I think they still have them.
Yeah. Well,
but you don't have to starch your camis anymore. You don't have to iron them. They're fold and fluff. You don't shine boots anymore because they're all suede. And I think about if I could, and again, I don't like to do math in public because I went to Illinois State, but I mean, think of the hours of your life you'll never get back: spit shining boots and ironing camis. Like, that alone was just, oh my God. So I don't know.
Can you set the picture for people, like, as the commander in this company getting ready to go into Iraq? Like, what are you hearing about this AO, the situation? How are you trying to prep guys? Well,
we did a lot of extensive training. We were a helicopter-borne company. So, although the only helicopter ride we got in Ramadi was from our Army brethren on CH-47s into Corregidor, but we were constantly doing live fire. We were constantly doing scenario-based training. we had to do a lot of rules of engagement training. We had legal briefs, like all this stuff. And then we were part of the Marine Expeditionary Unit as a battalion landing team. So, regular battalion, it's like 800 something dudes. When you become a battalion landing team, you become plussed up with your artillery guys, your tank guys, your engineer guys, all of these enablers, and it goes to about 1,200 people. And then you get sent over to the Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is part of the Expeditionary Strike Group, which is, 2 small deck ships, and then the LHD. We were on the Boxer, which is like a mini aircraft carrier. It can hold Harriers at the time, now F-35s, but helicopters and jump jets, and that's where the command element lives. So then we get chopped to the MEU. And our MEU commander was then Colonel Brian Boudreau. He's coming to our reunion too, by the way. He lives here in Texas. Great dude. He got us all on the flight deck on November 10th, 2006, which, by the way, was the Marine Corps birthday. And he announces to the entire MEU on the ship that we're going to Iraq. But it wasn't going to be like a traditional deployment. Because of everything that had happened up until that point. But to answer your question, like, the training was very intense. We're doing all these helicopter-borne operations. We're doing live fire exercises and everything I just talked about. So they didn't really have a lot of time to rest.
But did you know how lethal it was going to be? I mean, this book is about like intense day in, day out fighting. Did you know that was coming?
Nope.
No.
Had no idea. And what's more, Ryan, is those salty lance corporals and the corporals and sergeants. I don't know who it was that said to me, but it was at some point after a firefight in Ramadi, someone leaned over and he's like, sir, this shit is way worse than it was in 2004. Despite having the battalion lost a lot more guys in 2004, but there was less people in the city of Ramadi at the time in 2004. But it was, I mean, as we're ramping, we're going to talk about Ramadi because this show is called Combat Stories, of course. But to the listener, up until that point in 2006, which is when the surge strategy was ordered by General Abizaid, General Dave Petraeus, and George Bush. The war had just been what I describe as this big game of whack-a-mole, where the insurgents would pop up in one city like Fallujah or Baghdad, and we just hammer them down into fine powder. And then they go to ground. They would seep away. They'd reorganize, and then they'd pick a city of their choosing to pop up again. Well, when President Bush ordered an additional 30,000 forces to Iraq to really hammer down on the insurgency, that really allowed us equal pressure in every single city. We just happened to get thrown into Ramadi. Ramadi just happened to be the city where everybody wanted to fight that year in 2006. And when I say fighting, it literally redefined or defined what we knew about urban combat, what we knew about street to street, house to house, room to room fighting. It was a city of 300,000 people, men, women, and children, that was under attack every single day in every single part of the city. And it was literally like a pot boiling over, spilling into the burners on the stove. That's how fucking messy it was for us. And it wasn't a matter of if we were going to get in a firefight every day. It was when, how long, and how often. That's the type of enemy we were fighting. And they were a very well-trained enemy. We never took them for granted because they were taking their toll on us. We lost Marines. We got guys injured. But again, going back to what I said earlier, it was the Super Bowl of combat. It was a Super Bowl of being a grunt. And I'll tell you what, if you want a metric of success, when you're fighting an urban war, like, my ultimate metric of success, Ryan, was bringing as many guys home alive as possible, period. But I'll tell you, if it was about body counts and, my boys and the Army guys we fought alongside with 19 infantry, 177 armor, and the whole 1-1 ready first brigade combat team. We were lighting up the fucking scoreboard, man. I mean, it was just, they were crushing it. And we were a little different than the Army. I say that non-attributionally, but when we flew in, I think I had 198 Marines and sailors with my company, pure. But when I landed, the Army had all these cats and dogs laying around these firm bases, man. And I was like, what do you do? Oh, I'm with a biometric and tactical scanning system guy. I'm a retired SF, Green Beret. I'm like, you got a rifle? You want to go out in combat zone? Like, yes, sir. I'm like, what do you do? Oh, I'm a PSYOPs guy. We do, civil affairs. I'm like, you got a rifle? Get the fuck off the fob. Let's go fight. And I would send them all over to my first sergeant, Tom Foster. And he was just like, Jesus, sir, what are you doing? So that's how, my organic strength went from like, close to 200 to like, I think we had like 249 guys. Like that. I think that was.
How did you know to do that, Scott? Like, not everybody's going to do that, right? Like, why?
I don't know, man. Like I knew that subscribing to the way things had been done probably wasn't the way.
Got it. Yeah.
And we were really lucky to be supported by some really, really great commanders under the brigade combat team. Sean McFarland ran 1-1 BCT. I'm going to see him in January in 2006 in Fort Bliss, by the way, at the Ramadi reunion. But I worked originally for this guy, Lieutenant Colonel Chuck Ferry. Chuck was an SF dude. So new unconventional warfare, new insurgency. And he just kind of let me do my own thing. We just worked a little differently. And in comparison to the Army companies at the company level, those guys had like 80 or 90 guys in the company because they'd been slogging it out for a year in that city and they'd suffered a lot of losses. So when we roll in with 198 guys pure, we looked like fucking rock stars of the Army. And they just wanted us to go through that city and create havoc and just crush guys. And we delivered. That's what we were good at. That's what Marines do. Marines are really good at breaking shit up. And then when the war ends, we're not really great at building shit up. And, we never had a plan for that in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah. We can talk about failures later on in the show, but as we were crushing it day in and day out, like, the Marines, at every level, man, like the sergeants and the young lieutenants who were brand new, just thrust into this chasm of war, man. I tell you, I wouldn't be doing this interview. Had it not been for the sheer courage and bravery of these kids, and I call them kids because most people are like, they're 18, 19 years old in most cases. They're playing high school football 6 months before they were kicking doors in Ramadi. Like, I wouldn't be sitting here if it hadn't been for them, because they really took care of me and each other better than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And so when you go back and talk about how do you stay connected to recruiters and your drone circuits, like these Marines that I fought alongside, like I still get text messages from, saw gunners and, just checking in, so there's a bond.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's a real cool bond that we create. And not everybody wants to stay in touch, and I respect that too.
What was your day-to-day like early on in that deployment, like, as the company commander?
Oh, it wasn't a lot of sleep. I'll tell you that much. You sleep when you can. We'd go back in the evenings. Like a convoy would have to jock up, and it's not like driving from, your house to Walmart. It's even less. It's a shorter distance than that. It's like a grocery store run. But to do that in Ramadi was a significant emotional event, because you have to have firepower, you have to have accountability, you have to have medical supplies. So you're driving these very short distances, and the guys would all have to drive me back in the evening so I could go to the command center and get the intel brief. and find out what our orders were for the next couple of days. What we were doing with operations on the ground, everything from who we had killed off the HVI list, our high value individuals or high value targets. Who we were looking at next, what we were doing. I'd have to report, ammo counts, casualty reports, all the logistics. Like I do that in the evening. And then that same convoy would have to run the gauntlet of fire, and we get shot at by some insurgents on the way back. And then we just, we go in, it's like, we're back at our house. We had 4 or 5 houses too to be occupied. When I say houses, people used to live in them. Like we'd roll in, we'd patrol through part of the city. We lived in the city. So if someone's in the city and like they're living in this house, we're like, hey man, hope you got some family nearby. We kick them out. And, we didn't do it maliciously, but obviously you can't dig fighting holes in the city, man. Like, so we had to stay in the houses in the city or buildings or, abandoned places, but it also had to be key terrain. Like you don't want to live in a shitty building with no protection. So we had, we did what we had to do. So we'd go back, and in the morning, if we got a couple hours of sleep that night, we'd get up, get briefed on the patrols that were going out, and we were running anywhere from 8 to 12 dismounted foot patrols every single day in various parts of the city. And we would clear systematically with maps and numbered houses on these maps, and we'd highlight it. And then at the end of the day, after, shooting at bad guys and killing bad guys and, doing what we do, we handed out school supplies too sometimes, and met with the locals and had chai and bread with them. Like some of them actually liked us, man. They didn't want the insurgents in there. They wanted us to get rid of these fuckers.
Yeah.
Because they were nothing but a cancer in the city. And, I wrote about it. I always looked at these people too. It's like they weren't collateral damage. I fucking hated when the news would say the collateral damage reports. I'm like, these are people. These are human beings. These are Iraqi citizens that want nothing more in life than to grow up in their city or in their tribe and watch their kid play soccer on the weekends,
right,
driver's license, and be successful in whatever success means to them. So, we do that during the day. And then at the end of the day, we'd compare maps. All the platoon commanders would come to my location, and we'd radio back in, and then we would, prepare for that next night. So we would kind of sleep and be in the defense during the day. And then some guys are sleeping during the day. And then we would gear up and get ready to go out at night. And we operated exclusively at night, because we had night vision devices and optics and, laser beams and thermals, and we owned the night. The insurgents, they didn't stand a chance. And honestly, man, as good of fighters as they were during the day, they're humans. And most humans, when that big orange ball drops from the sky, they get sleepy. And we were very successful rooting them out at night, because we'd pull some of these, HVIs out at night after we'd get an intel report, and we'd do a raid on the house or the compound, and we'd just snatch them up. We'd put the flex cuts on them, and then we'd ship them back.
Would you just pick one of your patrols and just go with them?
We operated in zones. So the zones could have been a couple blocks or a couple, 100 meters away from each other. So you imagine these little nucleuses of, Marines and their platoons, and they're kind of bounding across the city, moving from this house to this house or this block to this block. And then we, during that morning planning session, we say, this is as far as we're going to go tonight. And so wherever you land on the map, pick a house, kick the family out, and that's where we'll be, So, and the Marines, Marines being Marines, they're smart. Like initially they picked the houses that were easy. And then they figured out, this house doesn't have any blankets in it, and there's no fuel oil for the stove. So then they'd find that house, and they're like, fuck this place, sir. We're going next door. There's blankets and stoves, and there's food. And like, so we had to do this. I mean, this is how we would survive. So that was kind of like the daily grind.
Do you recall the first casualty you had in your unit, or severe casualty? I would assume you'd remember the first, but
Oh, yeah, it was Corporal Dustin Libby on December 6th. I mean, I'd lost, friends in war before, but when you're a company commander of an infantry unit in the Marine Corps, is like we have a special bond. Like even before we deployed, and Corporal Libby was a Ramadi vet from '04, and you know, I say this, and I actually wrote about it. It's like, you're not supposed to play favorites as an officer, but like Libby was one of my favorites. Like I like this fucking kid, very gregarious. He was from Maine, kind of a just easygoing nature about him, and he didn't have a problem talking to officers, and he's still very respectful, but told you what you needed to hear. And so I was at the Combat Operations Center at Camp Corregidor when the call came across the radio. And I knew instantly where I needed to be. And I looked at Colonel Ferry, and, Chuck he turned to me. He's like, "Scott, go." We ran downstairs, and on December 6th, this was the beginning of one of the most complex coordinated attacks ever to happen in the city of Ramadi on December 6th of 2006. As we called my lieutenant, Pete Somerville, who ran the vehicles in that platoon, I said, "Pete, get the trucks out front." Pete gets them out there. As we run out of the CP, there is tracer fire in the sky, like a 4th of July fireworks show. There are rounds impacting the camp, snapping off the walls as I'm leaving the door of the command center. You're just walking through random bullets smacking walls as you're coming out of the front door of your house. And we get in the vehicles, and I remember just racing down Route Michigan to the ECP where he had set up where 4th Platoon was at with Seth Nicholson, and he was Libby's platoon commander. And I made my way to the roof, got a hold of Seth, and Libby had already been brought down. He was in the platoon operations center, and we called in a medevac. But being a rotary wing guy, like whether you're utility or an attack guy, like you can't land there. Like there's no landing zone. You can't land a helicopter in the middle of the street. It's just too dangerous. And flying a helicopter through that type of intense small arms fire, super dangerous. Yep. Even if you're an Apache, not wise. Yep. So I said, "Look, we don't have time to wait for a medevac. We're the medevac." I said, "Get Libby in the back of the truck." So we put him in my convoy, and almost immediately we drove him back down Route Michigan to the cache, the combat hospital, which was across the street from Camp Corregidor. And again, this is like, 2,000 meters, like 20 football fields, if people can imagine. We drove through this gauntlet of fire, and, the machine gunner on the top of the Humvee is just cranking rounds out of the 50 cal. Casings are spilling down. It's just like out of a movie. And as we pull into the combat casualty hospital, there's chem lights. I remember there's chem lights in the dirt, like a airport runway, and they drive us right in there. And, the Marines are, they're just, frantic because, Libby's dead. They can't get a pulse. They drag him out of the Humvee, and, we bring him in. And I remember Tom Foster, my first sergeant, was there, and the Army medics, they put him on a gurney, and they push him back. Libby had been shot in the back of the neck, right above his Kevlar and his plate. And I remember trying to push past the staff to go into the trauma room, and Tom, he just grabs me, and he just looked at me. He's like, "I got it, sir." He's like, "You need to get back out there." And I was like, he's right. Like there's 249 other Marines that need me. And I trusted that they'd take care of him. And he died.
Just thanks for sharing this. Like, what do you do next there? Like, how do you, I don't know, like process and compartmentalize, I assume? some of this to get back in the fight?
Yeah, we do. But again, you compartmentalize it, or whatever. You shift gears, but there's training that kicks in. There's also like humanity that kicks in. It's like there's a lot of other guys that need your help. And there's also a humanistic quality too that you want to get some fucking revenge. So that drives you. I never had that at the forefront of my mind, but you get back in that convoy and you drive back out there. And when we hit the ECP again, I got up on the roof and the Marines were just lighting it up. And there were fighters that were throwing hand grenades. They were within hand grenade
close
buildings. And that firefight, after Libby got shot, a couple other guys got wounded. After everything was said and done, we were in direct contact with enemy for 6 straight hours.
Jeez.
So, the silence at that point is deafening, as you can imagine. And we're back in the COC, and I remember I come down there and I had gotten blown off the roof, and an RPG hit the wall, and I fell off this ladder and almost broke my fucking neck. And I got a bunch of hardware in my spine to thank the Navy for now. But we're sitting in there, and I remember the Marines were eating the rations that come out in those cans. Like, it's like Marine Corps Army Tupperware, but it's more industrial. They're eating the spaghetti, the shitty cold spaghetti. Just, the adrenaline's wearing off. And, I remember Seth Nicholson, who was my platoon commander. He looks at me and he's like, he says, he goes, "This is the longest firefight you ever been in, sir?" I said, "Abso-fucking-lutely." And, now that I think about it, it almost brings me to tears. You got this 24-year-old lieutenant, and he looked at me and said, "I'm glad you're here tonight."
Wow. You said something interesting earlier that I assume isn't SOP, but you said like you got the call on the radio and you knew exactly where you needed to be. And it sounds like wherever that guy was, wherever Libby was, I assume that's not SOP, but maybe just something you felt you needed to do. Like, why go there instead of, I don't know, directing traffic somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great observation too. He was the first. Libby was the first casualty we had in the entire battalion during that deployment. So I don't know. It's just your big brother kicks in. You're like, you gotta go take care of him. And the other positions in the city that we occupied were under equal, if not more intense fire, but they hadn't suffered, catastrophic loss. They were holding their own. And that was, we'd only been in the city for a couple of weeks. This is like
early in the deployment.
Think about this. December 6th, I told you we got the order on November 10th. I think I flew ahead to Ramadi like maybe 5 days after that. We had Thanksgiving dinner at Camp Corregidor, and we were like out fighting in the city. Like, it was just literally just thrust into it. So it, like, right there, we knew like these guys were not fucking around. Like, this is where they were going to stand and fight. And it's part of one of the reasons why I wrote the book, man, is not, not just to share the bravery and sacrifice of these young Marines and soldiers and the families that support us, but this is a very key point during the war, where Ramadi, as the capital city of Anambra province, man, this is where they stood and fight. And we lost more soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen in Ramadi than any other city in the war. So it's, when I say, and I have it printed on the cover of my book, Iraq's deadliest city, it's not hyperbole. Like, this place in 06, 07, and throughout the 2-year period, I think in Ramadi, it was a sine wave of highs and lows of very, very intense urban fighting in that city. And, at the end of the day, they lost.
I try to follow fairly closely some of the fighting going on in Russia and Ukraine these days with the way drones are changing it. You got like entire companies on motorcycles and ATVs trying to evade. You got trenches. It all introduces its own set of challenges naturally. As you look back on that time in Ramadi, what were some of the more challenging aspects? Like you think of Fallujah in '04, a lot of the civilians were cleared out of the city. So maybe you didn't have the same like civilian to enemy ratios. Sounds like Ramadi is just a bustling city where you've got anywhere could be enemy, but also civilians. I don't know, like what were some of the harder things you had to wrestle with trying to overcome?
They did not do that. Like Fallujah, Operation Phantom Fury 1 and 2, like, most people imagine, General Mattis, Jim Mattis, who is also Magnificent Bastard, by the way. You see him on his bullhorn like, attention, Fallujah, if you don't want to be killed, leave the city. Fighters, if you want to stay, stay. If you do, you'll die. He makes this broad announcement. We did not have that. And the city was not bustling. But they were still trying to function. Like the cafes weren't open. It was hard for them to get gas in, a nation that has free oil, by the way. Like, they couldn't even get gas in their cars. They're like driving all the way to the western border of Syria to get gas in Iraq. And then coming back to Ramadi, it's like a 2.5-hour drive to go to the fucking gas station. It was surreal. But throughout all this fighting over so many years, it always there were these periods, even during a firefight, where I'd see things and this is where movies get it right. Things really slow. And I would see kids or people out in the street, like the middle of a firefight, or they were watching us fight as if it was a soccer game and some spectator sport. And they're watching us. And I'm thinking to myself, please go inside. This is getting bad. And we were in the middle of this firefight, but the enemy, they blended in with the local populace. They didn't have a uniform, and they were pretty smart about it. They would leave their weapons in these houses. They'd hide them. They'd come out. They'd see a target of opportunity. They'd engage the Marines. We'd fight back. A lot of lead being, slung back and forth, and hopefully we'd kill a few of them, turn them in, get rid of them, and then we'd just move through the city. That was friction, man. That was something that you don't get trained for. It was like, when people are dying and getting shot at around you, and there's civilians and kids, it does become very surreal in that circumstance. But there's, after all that happens and it dies down too, like there's this weird thing about combat that, despite seeing some of the worst things that humanity has to offer under some of the most unimaginable and horrific conditions, like there's this odd beauty that can be born from that. And I don't know if you can see it, flying, 200 or 1500 ABL, but when you're on the ground and you're looking at these kids and the people, or you're watching the Marines, hug each other or high five or bust each other's balls after a firefight. Like there's something beautiful about it. Like it's this crazy bond, and you watch it unfold right in front of your eyes if you take time to realize it.
You mentioned something earlier about if it weren't for these Marines, the courage, the bravery, you're not here having this discussion right now. Are there a moment or two that come to mind like that illustrate that? Is it you guys are clearing a building sometime? Is it just you're on the radio listening to what these guys are doing, these kids are doing?
There's probably 1,000 of them. I mean, I was pretty aggressive. A lot of people look at me now, Ryan, like, hey, you still look like this typical Marine, like, kicking doors in and jumping out of helicopters. Like, you're just laid back and,
well, look at your hair, man. For people who can't see you, the hair is great.
It wouldn't be a podcast if somebody didn't talk about my hair, but
all right.
And I was very aggressive, and I think the Marines knew that. They kind of fed off of it in some cases. I wasn't reckless, but I was calculated and aggressive. And sometimes I would take off, not just endangering myself, but the Marines always had my back. Like they were always there. You feel so invincible when you're protected by 11 other Marines in a squad or a company of 250 guys. And oh, by the way, you've got 2 tanks. You've got a section of Apaches, flying 500 feet above you, and they're talking to you on this radio. You feel invincible, and you've got this bubble around you. And when I talk about those young guys, like, they are all young. You were young back then. We were all. I wasn't that young. I mean, I was. I think I just turned 30. I was 34 at the time because I'd been enlisted. I was a little older than the average bear. But I think, and then I turned 35 on December 11th in Ramadi. So there's so many times where they saved my ass, or the Army did too. Those guys we fought alongside, like, super firefights that happen, and you think, like, man, I am not getting out of this one. And we had a platoon of Marines that gotten pinned down in this shitty part of southern Ramadi, and they called over radio, like, we need help. And you're like, all right, we got to do it. And so we jock up a convoy of Humvees. We had 2 tanks in support. That's a pretty powerful, manly thing to have too, by the way. It's like, you own your own tanks, these M1 Abrams. So we're rolling in, and it was just south of this main road that was called Route Michigan, and you might be familiar with it, but we get to this other part of the city. So as shitty as it was north of Route Michigan, it was shittier south of Route Michigan for whatever reason. It was like the slums of insurgency. And we go down there, and it's mayhem. Well, the Army had done such a brilliant job of setting up these defensive positions. They literally wired us out of the area we needed to go to, like triple strand concertina wire, like barbed wire, razor wire. And we had no way to breach it. It was like 6 strands. It was this massive hairball of tangled, metal and razor sharp wire. And we're like, how in the fuck are we going to get to our guys through this? Literally, the Marines get out without having to be told. And they're breaking out whatever. They had some bolt cutters, but most of them had their little multi-tool, the Gerbers, and they're cutting the wire, and they're stringing it back like a slinky toy. So the Humvees can drive across curbs, like cutting across medians in an intersection, just bouncing, and like they get in there. The tanks bulldoze over everything. And, we find these guys after they throw a smoke canister out there, and we're just getting lit the fuck up. I mean, there are guys from elevated position shooting at us, and then there's guys to the south as we're trying to evac these guys. They had a couple guys get hurt. And so I make a mad dash to one of the tanks who's just sitting there. And here's the difference for listeners. A lot of active duty guys don't know this. Like, there's a difference between Army tanks and Marine Corps tanks. Back in the day,
I do not know this. I'm interested. Yeah.
So back in the day, the Marine Corps tanks, M60s, and even the newer M1 Abrams, they had what's called a grunt phone. So on the back of the tank, there's a box that you open it up like a little utility thing on your house, and you pull that phone out, and you can talk to the crew, because we do tank infantry integration where we're walking behind the tanks. You've seen it on Full Metal Jacket how it happens, but we could talk to those guys. Army tanks do not have a grunt phone. They're like,
did not know this.
No, they're like, screw the grunts. So I climb up on the tank, and I'm literally banging on the hatch of the tank with my rifle, trying to get someone's attention. And all of a sudden, the lid on the tank that holds the tank commander, pops up maybe a couple inches. And I see this little, the little googly eyeballs in a tank helmet. And it's this lieutenant. And he's looking at me. And I'm yelling at him, fire down this road, that building right there. And he can't hear me. Like, we're getting shot at. He can't hear me. And I wanted to reach through the slit in that lid of the tank and rip this kid a new one. And so he finally takes off his hearing protection, Ryan. And I tell him, I go, we're being shot at from this building. And as I tell him, the tank just gets laced with small arms fire. And I'm thinking, I'm out of here. Like, start fucking shooting at something. And so the tank gets shot at again. I fall off the tank, and I'm thinking, I want to be small right now. And I'm hunkered up against the tracks of the tank. And I make a dash back to the building, and they start firing, and we save the guys, and we get them out of there. But it wasn't a short process. And it's funny is we could talk about a lot of stuff, but like as a writer, when I wrote about that in the book, I sent it to my editor, and she sends it back to me. She goes, "What are the tracks on a tank?" And I says, "Really?" I says, "You don't know the track," and no kidding. So like as a writer, as a storyteller, I had to describe them as the caterpillar-like treads that propel the tank forward. That go around the wheels, like things we kind of take for granted.
Are there any other moments like that when you're writing the book, like really having to relive some of these moments or talking to guys that you hadn't talked to in a while that brought up something you had either totally forgotten about or it maybe amplified something that you already thought back on?
Yes, but most importantly, when you're writing a story, especially one that's it's part memoir, it's part history.
Yeah.
But infantry guys and pilots are even worse at this. Like if you make a mistake, they will eat you for fucking breakfast. Like if you get one thing wrong, like if you're doing a qual, man, like you're doing a night qual, you're doing a check on this. Like if you come back in the hot wash, like, your guys in the aviation community, they will eat you alive. Like I know that. Like in the infantry, it's much the same. So as I'm writing all these stories that I knew, I wanted to make sure that I was, interviewing the right people and really having them fact check me. Like I remember it this way, like that story I just told. Did that really happen? Like, is that how you remember? Like, oh yes, sir. Like that happens. And so I do, just like intelligence gathering or information gathering, before it becomes intelligence, you get certain points of information, you validate it, you put it together. So like that was a long process. It took me, a year to do that. But more fun than that was when I would interview guys, for example, Sergeant Jonathan Espinoza, who's one of my squad leaders. He's coming to the reunion too. He retired as a first sergeant. He was all business, man. Like the Marines feared him. He didn't talk a lot, but he said a lot. Just his presence. Like he was, he's Hispanic, just no nonsense, just ball crushing, but like fair. And just super, just the epitome of a quiet professional.
Yeah, I feel like that's a high compliment that you just delivered right there.
No,
yeah.
no, I would not be the only one in that company to say that or that ever worked with John Espinoza. He lives in Texas too. So John, if you're listening, man, this is no bullshit. Like everybody thought that about you, but he got shot that day in the chest by a sniper during that whole tank escapade, by the way. And so he's evac'd. And when your guys get shot on the battlefield too, or killed or injured, like you really have this blind faith and trust that the system is going to just take care of them. Because when they get shot, when they get in that ambulance or that helicopter, they're just gone. You keep fighting. You keep surviving, which is what the real word is. It's survival in those types of situations. So Espo's shot. They took a round across the chest from a sniper. He's gone. It wasn't until I called his wife, Haiti, and John, and says, "Hey man, I'm writing this book. I think it's important that you help me fill in the gaps. I'd love to do an interview with you." And as I described him, he's not a real chatty Cathy. So I didn't, and he might have fallen into one of those categories like, that didn't have a lot of love for officers or whatever. But I was a Mustang, so maybe I got some bonus points. But when I finally shut up and told him I wanted to hear what he had to say, he talked for 2 hours.
That's awesome.
And you learn things putting a story together that you never even knew happened. And these are things that you think only happen in the movies, but really happen in real life. And Jonathan is one of those guys who gets severely wounded on the battlefield and basically breaks himself out of medical care to get back to his boys, and does it by hook or crook and
Yeah, I'm
hijinking,
sure.
you know,
Hitching a ride.
it was like something straight out of Catch-22 or MASH of our generation, so.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Just that's, when you start writing stories and especially ours is, when I heard those, I was like, there would have been no way I would have ever even knew that happened.
No.
I mean, some of when we get together, these reunions too, which are very important events for guys, they're like, "Hey, sir," and like when the conversation starts off with like, "Hey, sir," like someone's about to get thrown under the bus. Like, did you know that? And you're like, you just see this big ellipsis happening. Like,
yeah, that's great.
This is going to be embarrassing or incriminating.
Yeah. I used to go when I was in flight school. I'd go with my old man flew Hueys in Vietnam, so he'd take me to some of his reunions. It was great, man. This is like 25 years ago or whatever, but some of the stories these guys would tell from being in Nam are just hysterical. It's the same stuff for all of our units, just a different, as they like to joke, same shit, different toilet, but just same kinds of discussions. All right, listen. For people listening, Echo and Ramadi, if you haven't already read it, I feel like a lot of people who listen to this have probably already read it, but if not, please do pick it up. And there's more stories, obviously. One of the things we chatted on just before we hit record was some of the philanthropic work that you're doing. And you mentioned this celebrity softball classic. So I wanted to make sure we had a second for that.
Yeah. So I get a phone call from this guy, Tim Klund. We call him TK. He's an Air Force vet. And he invites me to Texas to play in this celebrity softball classic. I says, well, I'm no celebrity. He goes, no, Scotty. And like, he's like, I want you to play. And so at the time it became there were two games. There was a celebrity game and then there was a veteran game. And then it kind of became celebrity veteran. And then now it's like the celebrities play and like the veterans play like the 8th and 9th inning. And they
oh, nice.
Which was my advice. I go, hey, TK, we're never going to fill Globe Life Field at Texas Ranger Stadium if it's veterans. No one's going to come see us. They're going to come see Terrell Owens and Jim McMahon and Michael Irvin. And like, that's who they want to come see. So now we do it every year at Ryder Stadium in Frisco, Texas. It will be Saturday, October 4th this year. You can go to celebritysoftballclassic.org and see the game. But the beauty of it is, having worked in the nonprofit world for a lot of years as an executive director of nonprofit, what TK is doing, bringing all these celebrities, it's a fun day. It's a family event, and we raise a lot of money and we donate it to several selected veteran nonprofits like Adaptive Training Foundation, Camp Shield, and a lot of others that are very deserving, hardworking grassroots veteran organizations that are doing the right things for the right people for the right reasons. And I think that bringing supporters and donors and people that want to come to the game, it is important to me to stay connected to that healing space too. And we've also had a problem over this generation too, of all of these veteran service organizations, over 40,000, by the way, registered with the IRS out of 1 million. We've created a problem for ourselves, Ryan, where it's been this dark, boozy, drowning veteran coming back from war, and it's really done a disservice, and it's hampered our military recruiting efforts, because there's no 17, 18-year-old kid like I was that sees a guy drowning on a commercial in his combat gear or drinking himself to the bottom of a scotch bottle. It says, oh, that guy got his arm blown up and now he's living under a bridge, or he's an alcoholic. Like, where do I sign?
Yeah.
No one's doing that. And we're suffering from that in a military recruiting crisis. And I think that what TK is doing and the Celebrity Softball Classic every year in Texas is it's bringing brightness and it's exposing the greatness of what we're doing. It's showing all of these celebrities who think there's someone important, how important it is to give back. And this year, again, we are so lucky that the person and warrior singing the national anthem is 100-year-old Don Graves, World War II vet. 100 years old. Don knocks it out of the park, no pun intended, every single year. But it's going to be great, and we're going to have a lot of great celebrities there. And the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines Association is going to get honored on the field. Major General Livingston will be there.
Yeah.
It's just a great day. It's a great weekend for everybody involved. So that's who I'm supporting, specifically this year when people ask. And I've been doing it as a part of the softball game for 8 years, and I've met so many amazing people to that game. I mean, last year I got to meet Jim McMahon, which was a great story. I had him sign this poster board because I used to go watch the Bears practice, and my dad used to hang out with Buddy Ryan when Buddy was off rode by, and the only guy that didn't sign that piece of poster board, the Funky QB. So I brought it to the game, and me and Jim are in the dugout, and he goes, "Oh, I'm fucking signing this."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so it's a great cause to get behind. It's a great family event. You get to meet a lot of cool people. I started working too with a guy I met at that game, the DOC. I call him Tracy. Tracy Curry is one of the Plank owners and founders of Death Row Records. With Snoop and Dre, and me and Tracy met at the game. We both struck out, and we're hanging out in the dugout talking about life and philosophy and religion and our paths in life. And his new documentary came out. It's just amazing. And so I started working with him at his foundation too, to help, Dallas, Fort Worth kids who want to pursue a career in the arts. So we're working with those guys too.
What an unusual pair, the two of you, huh?
100%, man.
That's cool.
DOC's uncle was a Marine though. So, Tracy and I, we just, it's all chemistry, man. It really is. And, he's just a great soul, great human being, man.
Well, we'll put a link in there so people can, if they can't attend, at least donate something to help out. And then the last two questions I ask everybody, Scott. One is, when you were downrange, is there anything that you brought with you, carried with you, wanted to have nearby that was something somebody had given you, good luck charm, something important to you that you needed around?
No, I wasn't superstitious. I never carried any of that. Socks was the biggest commodity.
To just not have wet feet?
Yeah, it was a lot of people ask me, because I'm from, Chicago suburbs, like what's the coldest you've ever been? I'm like, Iraq. And it shocks people. It's like, no, it was because it was so cold at night, like you sweat through all of your gear, and the next morning you're just begging the sun to come out. And it was compounded by malnourishment and fatigue and, and stress of combat. But like your feet, man, if you're on the ground and you're walking so much, patrolling, is like having clean socks, like it's huge. And so we got these socks, and it was like, I don't know where they came from, but they were athletic socks, and like 3/4. So they weren't military socks. So I started wearing white cotton 3/4 socks. And then when I got back, to this day, I wear like 3/4. Like I would wear those like throughout the rest of my career. I'd take my boots off and like first sergeant would walk by, like, "Sir, those socks aren't regulation." I'm like, whatever, man. Like,
awesome. All right. And then last question. I think I know the answer to this, but looking back on 24 years of service, losing a lot of, not a lot of people, but near-death experiences and losing folks. As you look back on that time, would you do it again?
Absolutely. I would encourage this generation to enlist, to serve in some capacity, to join the military. I think there's absolutely no regrets that I have. I've met, obviously, just during this short interview, hundreds of thousands of people that have, taken that kid, who struggled in high school to where I'm at to now, to being surrounded by so many great people of influence that enrich my life. And there's a lot of people that don't. I cut those people out pretty quickly, but you know who those guys are. My bullshit meter's pretty calibrated at this stage of the game, and I can smell an imposter. But I have absolutely no regrets. And I think everybody that's listening to this show, whether you were in the military or not, find a way. Go to your local high school and talk to the JROTC guy to inspire these kids on why it's important to serve, because we are suffering a severe crisis with our military recruiting command. And they didn't even talk about it this month in front of Congress. They kind of glossed over it, but it is a real crisis. And when I use the word crisis, that's coming from district commanders in both the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. because I'm working as an advisory board to try and help solve that with a tech company. So no regrets.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. We'll have links to the books and the classic on the site.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again, Ryan. Semper Fi.